Hi guys, welcome back to Kingdom Come Deliverance for what will be the last reading video of this game. In previous videos we did the general section of the codex, the characters. Last time was the society bit. So now all that's left is the locations and the events. As you can see, there are, how many? Seven events. I'm missing one apparently. I don't know which one that would be. And surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, but I did unlock all the location entries. That would be weird if I had missed any, because, you know, I've seen everything of the map, so yeah, that would be strange. Anyway, let's start with the first location, which is Kuttenberg, or Kuttenberg, I suppose. Kuttenberg is today a district town of the central Bohemian region, 70 kilometers east of Prague. The founding of Kuttenberg, the official name of the city in the Middle Ages, came about thanks to the discovery of silver ore deposits in the vicinity and its location next to Sasau Monastery, the commercial and economic center of the region. City rights were acquired by Kuttenberg in 1318, after which time the economic activity of the city was taken care of by the so-called Urführer, or royal clerk. To keep the operation of the mint and the mines to a high standard and safe, a list of legal edicts was issued, Jus Regale Montanorum, the mining regulative. The city soon became rich and had the same powers as the old town of Prague. The wealthiest inhabitants of Kuttenberg were the German population, while a lower class consisted of mine workers, smelters, mint workers, artisans, and servants. Almost every city dweller had some connection to silver mining, minting, coinage, or trading. The treasures of found and mined silver supported the development of other Czech cities, including the construction of new buildings in Prague. The architecture of Kuttenberg is due to Wenceslas IV. During his reign, the former timber houses were rebuilt in brick or as half-timbered. There were also churches, a sterling court, and other public works built at the time. Kuttenberg retains its Gothic genius loci to this day. Not sure what genius or genius loci is. Okay, next. It seems some of these entries are fairly short, so the next one is Ledetchko. Ledetchko is a small village with a mill. During the 14th and 15th centuries, the village belonged to Arnold of Talmberg. The village originally had a second mill called Kuchelnik. Then we have Merhojed, a small village near Samopesh, which was the property of the Sasau Monastery in the 15th century. And then a few sub-entries. The Stone Man. The stone man is an unusual standing stone composed of red sandstone with a carving of a warrior with a spear. It is located at a crossroads in the Sasau region between Merhojed and the field track to Talmberg. According to an unsubstantiated theory, the stele was brought here from Sasau Monastery when it was reconstructed in the 14th century. The identities of the author of the relief carving and the man depicted remain a mystery. The stone man may have been a Slavic warrior or Saint Longinus with the Holy Lance. His name is derived from the Greek word for lance, who according to the New Testament used it to pierce the side of Jesus on the cross. In a second sub-entry, Budin Mill. In the Middle Ages, Budin Mill was a supplier of local villages and small towns. In the 17th century, it was part of Merhojed, becoming the property of Jan Budinsky in 1678, from whom it takes its name. Next is Neuhof. According to written chronicles, Neuhof by Sasau was a noble's court, which was destroyed during extensive floods. The small town of Nove Dvore was built in its place. It's a bit strange because in the game Neuhof is on the other side of the map as Sasau. But, by real world standards, I guess it's still pretty close. Or they just mean the river Sasau. I guess that's more likely. Next is Rattay on Sasau. Rattay or Rattay was a small market town with two castles. The upper castle, known simply as Rattay Castle, and the lower castle, known as Birkstein or Birkenstein. Birkenstein. The oldest written record of Rattay dates back to the... I struggle saying to the 13th century. Again. Rattay or Rattay was a small market town with two castles. The upper castle, known simply as Rattay Castle, and the lower castle, known as Birkstein or Birkenstein. The oldest written record of Rattay dates back to the 13th century, when it was the property of Przemysław of Rattay, mentioned in records in 1263 and 1289. At about the same time, ownership of Rattay passed to Burgrave Hroznata of Uzhitz, whose sons held several other castles and villages in the surrounding area. In 1293, King Wenceslas II gave Rattay to Bishop Tobias of Bichene. Then it became the property of Burgrave Hynek of Dauba, who was the heir to the house of the Lords of Lipa. Rattay experienced its greatest renown and prosperity under the administration of Henry of Lipa, died 1329, his sons and grandchildren. His son John, died 1338, was the most politically active. The town was also governed by Henry's relatives, the lords of Birkstein, Jeszek and Hanush. Under their administration, the two castles were built, as were the churches, and the village was given strong fortifications. Sub-entry Birkstein. The lower castle in Rattay, founded by Henry of Lipa before the mid-14th century. First mention dates from 1346, spreads over an island in the middle of the Shive stream. The castle is separated from the town by a moat. This is a Burgfried type castle with a massive tower, rounded corners in the rear, and 3 rooms on each floor. The entire structure is surrounded by ramparts. In 1447, the castle unfortunately caught fire and then quickly changed owners. It suffered even greater damage during the peasant uprising in 1627. 100 years later, from 1713 to 1724, it was rebuilt by Octavian Kinsky into a presbytery and bell tower. Sub-entry Upper Castle. The Upper Castle was built at the same time as the Lower Castle in the mid-14th century. It also burned in the same year as Birkstein, 1447. In the 16th century it was rebuilt into a Renaissance chateau, and in 1672 renovated in the Baroque style. Today it houses the local town hall. And St. Matthew's Church. The Lower Rattay Church was built in the 1360s at the instigation of Jan Ježek Ptaszek of Birkstein and his wife Anna. The first church was probably a single nave design and served as a parish church along with the Church of St. Nicholas, which no longer exists. From 1672 to 1691, it was demolished and rebuilt in the Baroque style, according to plans by Onge de Garde. It has survived in this form to the present day with just a few minor changes. The only remnants of the original church are the tombs of the estate owners. For example, a tombstone with the coat of arms of the Lords of Lipa, mounted into the cemetery wall, and the base of the baptismal font from 1421. And the last sub-entry for Rattay is St. Nicholas Church. Probably the older of the 2 churches within the castle walls. The first mention dates from 1343. It was located in the upper part of Rattay before the upper wall and partially served as a presbytery. From 1336, the Korechnik mill also belonged to the Rattay presbytery. Next we have Rovna. The village of Rovna lies close to Srebrna Skalitz, Silver Skalitz. Around 1150, a Romanesque church with a presbytery and cemetery were built there by monks from Sasau Monastery. The church was consecrated to the oldest patron of miners, St. James the Greater. The Romanesque frescoes are its most notable decorative element, painted in 2 stages, in the mid-12th century and roughly 100 years later. Then we have Samopesh. Samopesh is a small village in the Sasau region, not far from Rattay, first mentioned in 1397. Together with 2 nearby mills, Bylin, called also Bart's, and Budin Mill. belonged to the Sasau Monastery until 1412 and was renowned as a center of agriculture and for an ancient species of wheat locally known as Samopesh spalta, Samopesh spelt, from which the village derives its name. Then Sasau Monastery. Sasau Monastery is situated on a cliff above one of the many meanders of Sasau River, which isolates it on various sides. Its origins date back to the first half of the 11th century, when it was founded by Duke Aldrich at the instigation of the monk Procopius. Saint Procopius, canonized in 1204, became renowned particularly for wanting to preserve the Old Church Slavonic religious rites in the monastery, rather than adopting the Latin liturgy. According to the oldest document mentioning the construction and development of Sasau Monastery, Vita Major, the 11th century legend of Saint Procopius, the saint initially lived in a cave before building a church consecrated to the Virgin Mary and Saint John the Baptist. The monastery of the Slavonic Brothers imitated the design of the Abbey of St. Gall in Switzerland. The main building in the complex was the church with an adjoining wooden cloister. The original dwelling of the abbot was located on the western side of the courtyard, below the presbytery. The monastery garden is situated in the northern part of the grounds. Here, remnants of the first Sasau stone church, consecrated in 1070 to the Holy Cross, have been unearthed. After the expulsion of the Old Church Slavonic monks from Sasau, the monastery was taken over by Latinist monks from Brevnov. Abbot Dethard continued with the rebuilding works, completing a simple single-nave church in his lifetime. From the mid-12th century onwards, works resumed on the original plans, and the abbey church was reconstructed into a massive, ornamented, three-nave basilica. The oldest simple wooden edifices from the beginnings of the monastery included the cloister, or the monks' quarters, the prelature, the abbot's quarters, and the infirmary, hospital for monks. The cloister around the Elysian courtyard consisted of a quadrangle hallway with window openings, the monks' dormitory, the chapter house, the study, the refectory or dining hall, and the kitchen. Next is Sasau Town. Originally, Sasau, or Sazava, was a settlement on the left bank of the eponymous river, opposite the monastery. For over 100 years, the town was the property of the Benedictine monastery. Houses were centered around the Church of St. Martin and along the road to Prague and Kurim. During the Hussite Wars, the monastery and its surroundings fell into the hands of the Hussites, at which time the preacher gave sermons in the Czech language. Building work ceased from then until the mid-17th century, but the monastery survived. For more than 200 years after the monks were expelled, the monastery lands belonged to the local aristocracy. And a sub-entry of St. Martin's Church. The parish church of St. Martin was founded on the left bank of the Sasau River, in the middle of a small town in the 14th century. It is a single nave structure with a chancel, a steeple on the north side, and a chapel on the south. The entire complex is enclosed by a high graveyard wall that has survived to this day, although the church building itself has been altered completely, but for the original windows in the steeple. Then we have Skalitz. There was probably a settlement in the area where Skalitz or Skalitz lies today as early as the 13th century, though there is no mention of the castle until 1361. The development of the town was prompted by silver mining in the area, as well as the existence of the nearby parish of Rovna. The owners of the castle included Jeszek of Skalitz from 1384 and Bodal of Drahonice 1402 to 1403. Wenceslas IV took possession of it in 1403 and placed it under the governance of the king Sir Radzik Kobla. Later the very same year, though, Kobla was forced to flee the castle to protect the inhabitants of Skalitz from King Sigismund's invading army, which torched the castle and the adjoining village. The estate was never renewed thereafter. In December of 1403, Wenceslas IV granted the remains of the village to Jan Sokol of Lamberg. The ruin of the medieval castle and its fortifications was scavenged for building material for the Church of St. John of Nepomuk in 1730. Today only minor remnants of the gatehouse wall, the zwinger, and the perimeter walls remain. Next, Skalitz-Sasau District. The extent of the KCD game world corresponds roughly to an area in southeastern Bohemia around Sasau River, in which many historical heritage sites are located. The most notable include Sasau Monastery and the castles in Bohemian Sternberg, Rattay, and Skalitz, of which only a few stones can be found today. Next, Talmberg. This castle was built on a rocky promontory at the beginning of the 14th century, either by Ernst of Kaunitz or Rosnata of Uzhitz. For more than 200 years, the castle was the seat of the lords of Uzhitz, who were later renamed after their residents, the lords of Talmberg. In 1390, the castle came into the possession of Divish of Talmberg. The same year, it was seized by Havel Medek of Valdek, who took Divish prisoner. Medek did not release Divish until 1397, when he was forced to do so by a decision of the provincial court. Only a ruin now remains of the castle in the midst of residential development. Next is the Devil's Furrow. According to historians, the Devil's Furrow was both an ancient and an early medieval trade route leading through the Sasau fords and the Leib or Elbe River region, all the way to southern Bohemia. From there it continued to the Danube towards the Chotun village. Chotun village. Chotun, I guess. I don't know. My Czech is not perfect. Legend has it that it was made by Saint Procopius after he had yoked a demon to his plough. The road, 21 kilometers long, consists of a massive ditch 14 to 20 meters wide with a level bottom 2 to 6 meters deep and sloping sides. In some sections, the furrow even has 2 lanes. Together with several other parallel roads, it connected fords on the Sasau River with those on the Elbe River 35 kilometers away. It is exceptional in that it avoids the center area around Prague, unlike other provincial routes of later construction, which converge on Prague in a star-shaped pattern. Hence the theory that it originated before Prague became an important city. Then we have Uzhitz. The first written mention of Uzhitz in KCD Uzhitz dates to 1284. Until 1552, ownership of this small town was split between the lords of Talmberg and the lords of Rattay, who eventually became its sole owners. The medieval church of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, built in the 12th century, stands in the center of the village. And lastly, for the locations, Vranik, an early medieval hill fort or gorge first settled sometime around the 9th and 10th centuries. The northern side is protected by a steep slope leading down to the river and continuing northeastwards in a narrow, rocky strip of land which opens into a spacious headland formed by a meander of the river near Przywlake village. The hill fort is surrounded by a still visible, although in places strongly eroded, oval rampart. Okay, those were the locations. Let's move swiftly along to the events, which is the last section there is to read. Okay, and first is the abduction of Wenceslas IV. Wenceslas IV was a none too capable ruler, rather the opposite. During his reign, he was abducted several times in attempts to wrest power from him. Until now, I thought that abducted meant that he was kidnapped. Like in the entry about Wenceslas IV. But I assume they mean abdicated. Maybe not, I'm not entirely sure. Okay. The first time in 1394, he was taken captive in one of his residences. Okay, so never mind what I just said. I guess they do mean kidnapped and not abdicated. The first time in 1394, he was taken captive in one of his residences in Beroun, near Prague, and taken to Wildburg Castle in Austria. The abduction was engineered by the opposing nobility, called the League of Lords. In 1402, Wenceslas was abducted for a second time by his half-brother Sigismund of Luxembourg, King of Hungary, who aspired to the Bohemian throne with the support of the high nobility and incarcerated in Vienna, from where he managed to flee with the help of loyal nobles in November 1403. Sigismund had in the meantime brought in higher taxes on towns and monasteries. Any towns that refused to submit, he conquered and ransacked. The conflict grew into a protracted civil war, which did not abate even after the death of Wenceslas. Next is the Battle of Kosovo. The Battle of Kosovo took place on June 15th, 1389, between the Christian forces led by the Serbian prince Lazar Hrebeljanović, assisted by his compatriot, the noble Vuk Branković, and Bosnian king Tvrtko I, against the invading armies of the Ottoman Empire under Sultan Murad I and his sons. It was a decisive battle, although without a clear victor, which strengthened the Ottoman position in newly conquered territories in Europe. Can we take a second to appreciate the name, which has 6 letters and only one vowel? Tvrtko. Tvrtko, I guess. Next is the Battle of Nicopolis. The Battle of Nicopolis took place on 25th September 1396 between the Hungarian King Sigismund and the Turks, led by Sultan Bayezid. Sigismund's army was made up of soldiers from France, Burgundy, Germany, England, Italy, Bohemia, Poland, and other countries. In all, it was 10,000 to 15,000 strong. The Ottomans, who at the end of the 14th century controlled the entirety of the Balkans, numbered almost 20,000. The experienced Turkish combatants routed the Christian knights completely, largely because the Russian and French knights disobeyed orders, attacked the Turkish vanguard under the misconception that it was the main force, and were subsequently crushed. Those who didn't die on the battlefield were brutally put to death, reportedly up to 3,000 men. The wealthiest were taken prisoner and saved only by paying a ransom, which they paid over decades. When news of the defeat reached Paris, no one believed it, and those who had initially spread the news were put to death by drowning for spreading malicious lies. The Ottoman victory was a triumph of Islam over Christendom. The Turkish army represented a real threat to European countries, especially Hungary. Then we have the Conquest of Kuttenberg. In December 1402, during Wenceslas' imprisonment in Vienna, Sigismund attacked Kuttenberg, and by the beginning of the following year, seized and ransacked the town. Kuttenberg was loyal to the king and staunchly defended by its miners. Miners with an E, just FYI. When they finally surrendered, they were force-marched to Sigismund's encampment near Kolin and made to kneel before him in the mud in subjugation. In addition, they had to pay huge sums of money in reparation, even though the town and its environs had been pillaged by Hungarian soldiers. The treasury in Kuttenberg held not only coins, but also precious jewels, gold and silver. Wenceslas later estimated the wealth seized by Sigismund to worth 1 million in gold ducats of the day. Next is the Golden Age of Charles IV. When the young son of John of Luxembourg, Charles, inherited the title of Moravian Margrave and subsequently the Czech throne, He embarked on not only economic but also cultural development of the kingdom, a period dubbed the Golden Era. In 1348, Charles founded one of the oldest universities in Europe. Many cities, towns, and castles acquired new fortifications and new bridges, infrastructure, and churches were built. To strengthen his position in Europe, he made good use of political marriages, thus allying his family with prominent families in neighboring countries. He even had influence over the appointment of ecclesiastical dignitaries. Thanks to firm rule and a policy based on alliances, he was able to keep the peace in Europe. Charles was an educated monarch, interested in the arts, which reflected in the architecture of cities, especially Prague, where under his rule many new houses, churches, including St. Vitus Cathedral, and the city walls sprang up. The second to last entry is the Sacking of Skalitz. Little is known about the war in 1402 to 1403, when Sigismund invaded Bohemia and tried to seize power, and the records that do exist are fairly vague. However, we do know the fate of Skalitz, Silver Skalitz, which was burned to the ground on 23rd of March 1403. We know the exact date because a document was preserved that Sigismund signed that day in the siege camp. Sigismund undoubtedly chose Skalitz because silver was mined here, and the town was administered by the royal hetman Rattay, a supporter of the king. Sigismund apparently wanted to disrupt the flow of money going to Wenceslas. According to legend, Kobila and his people, who were hiding from the attackers in the castle, were able to escape because of a great storm that blew up and forced the besieging army to wait until morning to take the castle. The castle defenders took advantage of the opportunity and under the cover of darkness fled to nearby Rattay. In the morning, the only thing Sigismund's men found in the empty castle was a goat. This is also in the game. I think I missed this. Sigismund then razed the town and the castle to the ground, and the castle was never rebuilt. Today, only the foundations remain. Now I'm curious if there actually is a goat in the castle. Maybe the cutscene when the army enters the castle. But yeah. If they say it's in the game, I assume it actually is. I just don't specifically remember. Okay. And the last entry, which is a fairly lengthy one, is the Western Schism. The Papal Schism, or Western Schism, was a rift in the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, during which there were two papacies existing simultaneously, one in Rome and the other in Avignon, France. It began in 1378, the year after Pope Gregory XI brought the papal court back to Rome from Avignon, where it had resided for almost 70 years due to hostilities between the Roman papacy and the Kingdom of France. When Gregory died, the Neapolitan Bartolomeo Prignano was elected pope with the name Urban VI, from 1378 to 1389. He, however, quarrelled with the very college of cardinals that had elected him. They therefore declared his election void and elected a new second pontiff, Pope Clement VII, 1378 to 1404, who re-established the papal court in Avignon and was recognized by Scotland, Castile, Aragon, Navarre, and Portugal. Siding with Pope Urban VI in Rome were Italy, Germany, Bohemia, England and Ireland, Flanders, Poland and Hungary. The schism continued even after the death of the original rival popes, with the election of Boniface IX in Rome and Benedict XIII in Avignon. The popes in Avignon were called anti-popes. At this time, European efforts to restore the unity of the Roman Catholic Church were growing. Unfortunately, neither the council nor the popes themselves were able to reconcile, as neither side was willing to budge from their demands. In 1409, the dispute escalated to the point that the cardinals declared both popes invalid and elected a third, the anti-pope John XXIII. None of the popes submitted to being dethroned, however. The conflict embroiled the rulers of the various countries involved, among others Sigismund of Luxembourg, who took the side of John XXIII. The Council of Constance was convened on November 5th, 1414, to resolve the issue. The council secured the resignations of anti-pope John XXIII and the Roman Pope Gregory XII, and in 1417 elected a new pope, Martin V, based in Rome. This essentially brought an end to the schism, although there were subsequently two more anti-popes who continued to be supported by a minority, Benedict XIV and Clement VIII, who resigned in 1429, leaving Martin V once again the sole pontiff. Such a messy business. But yeah, those kind of sadly were all the entries there are to read. At least the ones I've found. So yeah, I guess there is nothing left to say about this game. And I can finally uninstall it from my PlayStation. I've left it installed all this time. It's at least several months after I finished the game. But I left it installed to be able to do all these reading videos. Anyway, I feel that I'm starting to stall. So I will just leave you with thank you for watching and for listening. I'm not sure I have a game at the moment which has reading stuff. So there might not be any reading videos for a while. I don't know how long. But I'm sure there will be more reading videos of whatever game in the future. Okay. I'm really starting to ramble. Thank you for watching and for listening, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.